strong partnerships with funders can be incredibly useful. As soon as you start building that strong relationship, you become trusted to them. I would think about having those things in place that make it easier for you. A bank of potential responses, a folder that people have got access to that's got your key documents and things like that in. If you can have a cost sheet where you've got what room hire and stuff like that might cost. Sometimes because you're so familiar with your service, you might not actually describe it as well as someone who doesn't know it, because you forget things. Because it's your day-to-day, those things just slip out of your brain.
Now, in this episode, we will unravel the intricacies of financial support acquisition, providing you with expert tips to refine your approach to funders. I'm pleased to say that joining me to do that is Stacey Adams. She brings over 20 years of extensive leadership and management experience, spanning the charitable, public health and local government sectors. Hi, Stacey. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So you have a wealth of experience across different sectors. What do you see as some of the key elements for successful partnerships, particularly between community organisations and local as well as local government?
And I think partnerships are one of those unbelievably key things that are probably slightly underplayed in certain ways. And I think it depends what level of partnerships as well. It's one of those things that's so important and integral, but you've got to get it right. In terms of setting out those expectations. Like if you're setting up a partnership, how is that going to work? How is it reciprocal? I know I've been approached to be in partnerships sometimes with people, and actually it's more of a one-sided thing where it's they need something from us or the organisation that I'm working for, but I can't see what there is in it for me. And I think that's one of the key elements, is making sure that both sides of the partnership, or all elements of the partnership, have got something beneficial from that. I think it's really important to be really clear about what that looks like. So whether that is a terms of reference or some kind of service level agreement, just so that everyone knows what their roles and responsibilities are within that. And then obviously if something was unfortunately to go awry with it, you have got that kind of leading document to go back to. And I think a lot, it just comes from trust and building networks. You've got to get out there and meet people and chat to them and find like-minded people and organisations. I've turned up to, partnership meetings and you stand having a brew with someone. Unfortunately, that's been a lot less frequent since COVID, but yeah, having a brew with someone, you're having a chat, you realise that your organisations are kind of similar, or you've got similar values as people, and that brings people together to work together. So it's really important to foster and nurture those. And I think that's a really key element, is meeting new people, chatting to them, finding out what they're about, and those partnerships having a balance to them. For me, it's the same as community consultation. An organisation might want to consult with a community, but what's in it for that community? So it's thinking about bringing that balance to it as well, I think is really, really important, so that people know that it's something beneficial for them and they don't see it as something that they don't really need to do, or a challenge, or it's very tokenistic and done at the last minute. I know I've been in a position where, you're writing a funding bid, the deadline's really, really close, you need key partnerships, and you're just scrabbling for people that you can put in, but you haven't really thought about how that's going to work in reality, financially, or in terms of the support that's going to be given and stuff like that. And I think if those elements aren't worked out and agreed upon to start with, I think that's where you can potentially have some sticky issues going forward.
Yeah, so you bring up actually that point around needing funding at times, and sometimes that requiring the partnerships that you may seek out. But what about thinking about some of the challenges when approaching funders, and even looking at that as a partnership relationship, rather than it just being, I need your money to deliver something that I want to do or need to do?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, those relationships are just so essential. It is building those relationships and thinking about how can I be useful to them as well. So I think that's one of the key things really for me for networking and building partnerships, is not just having those conversations and regularly catching up, but being useful to someone. So, if you've done your research on them, you know them a little bit, you might know what makes them tick. Is there something that you've seen recently on LinkedIn or in the news, or an article or some research that's been published that you can share with them to make yourself useful to them as well? I think that helps build a stronger foundation for the partnership, because they see it more as a reciprocal relationship. And strong partnerships with funders can be incredibly useful. I've definitely worked with funders previously, where as soon as you start building that strong relationship, you become trusted to them. So if you've got your foot through the door once, they will come back to you if they've got additional funding, they want to extend your project because you've done a good job. So reputationally, it's really, really important to get that right. And I think that key thing is, can you be useful to them? So other than the, regular chats and updates and trying to let them know what you do, they've got loads of people doing that for them. How can you stand out from the crowd and be slightly different? So how can you provide some value for them in a different way? And you can get quite creative with that. But yeah, I think that's really important, and it helps you know better and understand better what they're looking for as a funder, which means that if you're applying to them or you're supporting someone who is applying to them, you really know what those key things are to make sure they're in the bid. Keywords or key things that they're particularly looking for, which can help that bid be more successful.
Yeah. And I mean, for people who may be a little bit newer into the space of bid writing, for example, or approaching funders, how do you gather that type of information? What approach do you take to stand out from the rest?
I mean, I think it's easy to get overwhelmed with it, definitely for sure, because there's so many different ways that you can find out. I would suggest definitely signing up to bulletins from your local CVS. Like, they're a real hub of information locally, and they often have a funding element either on their website or it'll be in their bulletins, and there you can see the sort of things that are coming out in your area. And if you're geographically based, I think that's a really useful starting point. And also, a lot of them have got funding to support organisations with that funding. They might do a meet the funder exercise or different types of training that you can access. So I would say definitely first port of call, if you're not really sure what you're doing, go to your local CVS and use that as a starting point, because they will have loads and loads of resources. And if they can't help you, I'm sure they can point you in the direction that you can. That's what I've definitely done in the past when I've not been sure where to start, because there are loads and loads of funding portals and you can get lost in them, and some of them are easier to search on than others, but I think familiarizing yourself to start with, what does that look like? Where do I get this information from? What's the process for different types of funding? Have we got that information? I think that's one of the really important things as well, because to go into a funding bid, a lot of them are going to want you to provide either accounts or certain policies. It's not just the answering the questions of how you're going to deliver what you deliver, it's those other little elements as well. So that helps you to get bid ready.
Mm. And for smaller organisations and newer organisations, because you mentioned a very valuable point there about that additional information, what advice can you give them, or what suggestions would you make in terms of the approach they take if maybe they don't have that longevity or that history, but then, are confident that they can deliver the service?
I think that's where those partnerships come in. Either partnerships with another organisation where you can get your name out there, or those partnerships with funders where you can build that real network. Because there will be funders that will like particularly niche things, and they'll love the passion and enthusiasm of a new project that's been set up. It is difficult for a newer and a smaller organisation because you're up against organisations that have got bid writing teams. But I think that can be both a blessing and a curse, because, if someone's churning out lots and lots and lots of bids, they're not going to have that real heart. And I think that's one of the things that's really, really important. And those smaller community organisations are just full of heart, but they just might not have the capacity to reflect on the more governance-y side of stuff and getting those policies and procedures in place. And I think that's again where the CVS could come in. I've definitely worked in a charity where we've supported smaller charities, given them our suite of policies, brand them up yourself. At least you've got all those documents now and you don't need to worry about looking for them. So there is support out there, and there's lots of different ways to do it, but it comes back to that networking again, finding like-minded people, getting to know which funders might be sympathetic to the cause that you're working for, and start building relationships with them, because they want to fund great grassroots community organisations. So you're in a really ideal position there, and use your passion and see if there's an organisation out there who can do bid reviews for you. I no insult to any bid writers out there. I haven't had great experience of bid writers in an organisation, because they transport in, they don't know that all of that kind of unsaid stuff that when you work for an organisation. You know exactly how it works, your community, all of those little nuances of the service. It's really hard to get that to someone new, and that's a really key part of the bid. I think a lot of funds want to see that heart, like, why are you so passionate? What difference does this make? What impact are you going to have? Who would notice if you weren't there? I think it's really difficult when you bring someone in because when you know all of the nuances of the day to day of what you're delivering, trying to explain that to someone else and for them to fully understand it and appreciate it takes some time, and they do need to see it and feel it. And when you're working in that organization, that is your day to day. So you've got the better level of understanding. So that's why I think even if you're not confident with writing the bid, the people in your organization know it better. And a team approach can work as well. Don't ever think you've got to write an entire bid on your own. Bring in other people in your team. So when I've done it previously, so when I've been a senior manager, say we were writing a bid for an advocacy service, we'd get one of the advocates in, the advocacy manager in, another senior manager in for perspective, someone from finance in, so that as a team all together, we could discuss how it might work, what it might look like, and then divide up the sections. And then with that kind of team approach, it takes away that massive pressure. You've also got other people checking it and sense checking it and stuff like that. And I think if you can start with that and even pull together a basic bid, but then get a professional in to review that for you, someone who's experienced with writing bids, and just make sure you've got all those nuances in. So sometimes because you're so familiar with your service, you might not actually describe it as well as someone who doesn't know it. Because you forget things because it's your day to day, those things just slip out of your brain. Whereas someone coming in with fresh eyes can be like, right, you need to, if you split that bit up, write that bit a little bit better, tighten that bit up, then give you some tips and hints. And also that then gives you the skills to improve the next time that you do a bid. And I think that sort of style of bid support, it gives people sustainability within their own organization. They don't have to bring in an external person every time they want a bid writing, whilst all the time their bid writing is not getting any better. So I think adding that value to an organization is more beneficial, and that's something that I'm working with SEBD Group and Aspire for You on at the moment, is working with smaller organizations and new organizations to help them have the skills to write their own bids and apply for funding, because the knowledge about their services, we don't have that. They're the best people to write that, but we do have the expertise in terms of writing loads and loads of bids, being exposed to lots of different funders and networks, delivering services through funding bids. So that's the sort of thing that we can help with, and that bid readiness, which I think is really important, to think about. Have you got, like for me, a bid bank is really, really useful if I'm writing bids. It's got all my key documents in it. It's got the blurb that describes what the organisation is and what it does. And then kind of bids by theme. Because that way, if you're like, oh, I've just seen this really good, say it's a mental health bid, 16 to 18-year-olds service provision, I can go into that bid bank. I can be like, right, where have I written something that's similar to this? And at least you've got a starting point then for cutting and pasting. And because sometimes I think looking at a blank document's really, really hard. Like where do you start? What should I start writing? But that's also where AI can come in. Like get a bit creative. Like I wouldn't use it to fully write your bid. Like I think it's great as a template / starting point, and then rewrite those sections and also check it for Americanized spelling, because that's a real dead giveaway that you've used AI for it. But I think it can help you give that real starting point. Or if you want, you want to rewrite something to make it sound clearer in terms of the question that's been asked, plug it into AI and see what it comes out with. So there are lots of tools out there and different types of support. And I would just say, don't be scared. Your everyone knows their organization the best. You're in it. You're in the best position to explain what it does and what that passion and what that heart is. The other elements that you need to know are teachable. So you might not know them now, but there is support out there that you can access. There's training, there's different support from the CVS, and practice. You're never going to get better at it. Like with anything, you're not going to get better at it unless you practice that art of writing a bid. But get support in. Don't do it individually. Get other people to review it and see it. And I think that kind of collaborative approach really, really helps, and not think you've got to do something in isolation.
Yeah. Do you advocate maybe having a standard or developing a standardized approach to how you maybe do bids within your organization? So as you say, whether it's a combination of bringing a team together, or do you feel like each separate bid should have a separate approach?
I mean, I think bids aren't wildly dissimilar. I think the approach that you take as an organization really depends on you as an organization and who you've got access to within that organization. what's going on for you at that time in terms of your resource, and what other challenges you might have in terms of service delivery. If you're in a very small organisation that is delivering services to communities, it can be really hard to carve out that time. So your approach would be slightly different. However, I would think about having those things in place that make it easier for you. So a bank of potential responses, a file that people have got, a folder that people have got access to that's got your key documents and things like that in. If you're worried about not having the right policies, most policies are available by Google. Um, so you can find it and tweak it to your own organization. If you can have that bank, and if you can think about what your potential costs are, if you can have a cost sheet where you've got your hourly rates for what your staff's going to cost you, what room hire and stuff like that might cost, that will really help you pull together a budget much, much easier instead of feeling like you're starting over again each time you're doing a bid. If you've got some of that information already that you can start cutting and pasting, and as a reference for your organization, not only does it make it easier for you when you go to write a bid, but if someone else in your organization was going to, I've worked in larger charities where if it was under 5K, someone could apply for that, and senior management would just oversee it. We wouldn't actually be involved with doing that bid, which empowers those staff to give them those skills. And I think that's the real key thing for me, is people learning those skills so that they develop and become better within their organization as opposed to buying it in externally. Again, no offense to bid writers, but I do think there's a little bit of storytelling you just can't get from transporting in to write a bid.
Yeah, no, understood. Going back to just the theme of and a discussion around partnerships, and obviously we've talked a little bit about how that works in a bid setting. Your career has spanned 20 years now. I'm sure you've seen a lot over the years. Do you feel like the way in which partnerships and collaborations are developing is improving, or actually is it getting worse? And are people utilizing them enough?
I don't think much has changed, unfortunately. I think, yeah, it's for me, the foundation of any successful project I've ever managed, overseen, or run has been those partnerships, the local partnerships, working with other organisations, being able to partner with other people, and having transparency within those. I think if you can get them right, they're an absolutely phenomenal resource. And, it's a reciprocal arrangement. You're supporting each other. You can get on really well. It can go really well. It can be really, really tricky. And I think, particularly in the voluntary community sector, I think there's no real understanding of what competitive tendering has done to it.
Right.
If partnerships are really, really important and really, really valuable, but if your organization is, most VCSE organizations are struggling for funding, struggling to keep the doors open, struggling with making sure they've got enough reserves. So if you're fighting with the other organizations in your area for funding. So I think that puts an additional barrier in place. You've got to work in partnership, but at the same time, if you could win the funding and not let the people next door win the funding, what would you pick? So I think that has added a layer of complexity into the sector in terms of that competitive tendering. But I still think partnerships are just phenomenally valuable because you can't do everything yourself. And organizations can bring additional value. And if you can find a really good way of doing that, where it's a reciprocal arrangement, it's really, really clear, and you've got that respect and trust in each other, like it can just be phenomenal because it can open up so many more doors to you. But you've got to get those foundations right, and you've got to make sure that it is reciprocal. You've got agreements in place. You're meeting regularly. The communication's really great and really clear, and that clears up issues. I think, yeah, that competitive tendering, and when you're kind of thrown together to deliver something and that relationship isn't there, that can, cause some challenges, shall we say.
Indeed. So, as a final thought and a piece of advice, what would you say to particularly smaller, up and coming organisations who maybe need those partnerships a little bit more in terms of getting their name out there, getting these projects off the ground? What advice would you give them as sort of the foundation of what they need to be thinking about to start the process for getting those partnerships?
Go to your local CVS, see what local networks there are, get some of the workers there are phenomenal, like the level of knowledge that they will know about local areas and like hyper local areas is fantastic. Speak to them. get yourself to, whether they're online or in real life, networking meetings, and just chat to people and tell them about the wonderful thing that you want to do and the wonderful work that you want to do, or contact us, and we can help you with that. But I would just say, just try and get out there. If the starting point is your CVS, your local CVS is just a literal font of knowledge. They will know what grant funding's coming up, what partnerships are going on, what local meetings are going on that you might want to get to, and get yourself out there and talk about how fantastic you are. But think about, I would say, get your elevator pitch. If you were stuck in a lift with someone and you had a small amount of time to showcase the wonder of your organization, what would you say? Get that in place and have that ready so that when you're going out networking, you've got that. It's a refined pitch, not so that it sounds rehearsed, but you know exactly what it is that you're saying to people and how you're showcasing what you do.
Fantastic. Stacey, thank you so much for your advice. That's been so valuable and given us lots to think about in terms of approaching bidding, funders, and partnerships. I hope that this has given you some insight into approaches that you can take to really unravel some of the complication that can be involved in the funding process, and more importantly, gather some great advice for how to move forward effectively with meaningful partnerships that could make a huge difference to your organization and the work that you do. Come back for another episode of Leading Communities podcast real soon. We'll see you then.